So today we're going to do another day on Aristotle's ethics. And if this were an ethics class, we'd spend about 3 weeks on it. We don't have that luxury in an intro class because this is, a survey. We look at a lot of stuff and we don't go that deep into it, but we want to introduce you to a lot of things. Now this chapter is not just about ethics though, or this book, book 3. This also has to do with metaphysics in a way, because it has to do with responsibility, human responsibility. So that means that it has to do with the structure of human beings, the way that we're put together. There are some things that we might say, or there are some views which might hold that everything that a human being does is totally free. There's other views that say that everything that a human being does is totally determined. It's not actually up to them. And these are metaphysical views. These aren't just ethical views. We're going to be mainly looking at the ethical implications. But I want you to keep that in mind over the course of the semester, because we're going to approach this topic again. We're going to look at whether you actually do have what we call free will. How many of you, just to sort of take a poll, how many of you think that you have some degree of free will? Is there anybody here who thinks that you don't? That everything you do is determined? Well, then there's kind of a puzzle, right? Actually, 2 puzzles. Are there any people that you think don't have free will on some level? If you ever say something like, well, that person couldn't have chosen otherwise than to be what they are, then you're in effect denying them free will, right? What is this free will that we're thinking of then? That's kind of fuzzy, isn't it? I mean, if we all do think that we have it. All of you do. I think I've got free will. What exactly is it? That's a little bit harder to say, isn't it? It's sort of like time. St. Augustine, somebody that we're not going to read this semester, I wish actually we had the time to, he talks about time and he says, when nobody asks me what time is, I think I know exactly what it is. I'm working with it perfectly fine. As soon as you ask me what it is, I realize I have no idea what I'm talking about. I think it's very similar with free will. Somebody who you are going to read this semester pretty soon, St. Anselm says that free will is really a very mysterious and murky thing, and it requires learning about a lot of other things in order to figure out what free will is. Aristotle's not going to go quite as deep into his analysis of it, but these are very complex metaphysical issues. This also ties in with what we call philosophical anthropology, or sometimes we call it the metaphysics of the human person, again, because it has to do with these fundamental issues. We're going to look at it from an ethical perspective, though. So I want you to think about these questions that I've put on the board. And I would like you to, you can either write them down or just have them in mind. And I want you to think a little bit about these. What do we hold people responsible for? Think about a few things that we generally hold people responsible for. Maybe not every time, but generally, right? And then think about another thing, the flip side of that. What don't we hold people responsible for in their actions? Some actions we hold people completely responsible for. Other actions that they actually do, we don't hold them responsible for. What are, some examples of that? Then you can ask another question. What should we hold people responsible for? Maybe we don't actually have the right answers, all the time when we're doing this. Maybe we don't hold people responsible for some things that we actually should hold them responsible for as a society. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe we hold people responsible for things that are really out of their control. I'll give you some examples of that. I don't actually need you necessarily to come up with these. It'll be enough if you can come up with these, and then we'll talk in class about this last question. One of the people who if you take my ethics class, you'll read, Jeremy Bentham. He was a great legal reformer, and the British legal code at the time was kind of harsh, almost barbaric. You could commit a very small crime and get a really huge penalty. There were lots of capital crimes. Of course, this was not that unusual. Most of the legal codes at that time were like that. And he thought that a lot of people were being held responsible for things and being punished severely for things that really they had no control over. You know, stealing, this is a classic dilemma. You have children. You have no way of getting a job, no way of getting money. Your children are starving. Do you steal bread to feed them? Well, you know, in England, at the time that Bentham was writing, if you did steal that bread, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. I mean, now what would happen in our society? They would say, don't steal that bread. That's a misdemeanor. Maybe if you were in California and 3 strikes and you're out and you've already done 2 felony offenses, you'd get in a lot of trouble. But for the most part, we're pretty lenient on that. In England, they weren't. You know, that was a life and death daily question for a lot of people. So, you know, should we hold somebody responsible for stealing bread in a situation like that? Or think about addiction. If you actually are addicted to something, with certain types of addiction, it can remove your capacity for free choice. Think about it. You know, if you are hooked on any of the really big, hard drugs like cocaine or crack or meth or heroin derivatives, you know, various opiates. I suppose we could add Oxycontin to that, you know, a few other drugs as well. If you're addicted to any of those sorts of things, you have to feed that addiction. And you will do pretty much anything you need to feed that addiction, right? That's why we have skits about, you know, crackheads who will do just about anything possible to feed that addiction. You know, think about Dave Chappelle, right? His character, the crackhead. Why does that actually hit home? Because, you know, why could you, yeah, that's right. Why could you actually make a character like that? Because people can look at that and say, yeah, people who are addicted to this or this, they are less responsible for their actions. So, are there cases where people are treated as not being responsible, but they should be treated as responsible? There might be cases like that too, right? So let's look at some of your answers to this. What are some things that we hold people responsible for? Yeah?
What they say.
Okay, good. What they say. Let's see if I can... It'll have to be kind of small, right? What they say. So if you blurt out somebody's secret, now you did something wrong, right? If you call somebody a bad name, you know, you were responsible for that. Yeah.
How they treat other people.
Okay. How they treat others. Do we always do that? What if somebody just has a mean streak to them? Do we sometimes excuse them and say, you can't really take it to heart, the fact that that person tripped you? Anybody ever say anything like that? I'm not asking about you personally, but have you ever seen people excuse other people on the basis of their character? They're just kind of thoughtless. So we don't always hold people responsible for everything with how we treat others, right? And what else do we have? What other kinds of things do we typically hold people responsible for? I'm going to hold all of you responsible for your performance on the exam, right? I'm going to test you. I'm not going to hold one person responsible for somebody else's performance. Right? I'm not going to say, okay, Mr. Kuhn is the only student who's going to matter in the class. Whatever grade he gets, everybody else gets that grade. That would be crazy, right?
Yeah.
He'd be studying a lot then, right? Because all of you would be on his case to study hard. That could be kind of an interesting thing to do to a class sometime.
Please don't take me.
You know, when I say interesting, I don't mean I could actually do it myself, but I'm sure somebody's tried that. What else? What else do we hold people responsible for?
Like our own decisions in life.
Decisions. Okay, so now this is kind of interesting. You can decide to do something, And that precedes the actual action, doesn't it? Like I can decide, I decided earlier today that I'm going to a lecture later on tonight after this class. I'm going to stick around here at Marist, where I've been since 8 o'clock, and go hear somebody talk about philosophy. And there's reasons why, and I'm responsible for choosing that. I haven't yet done it, have I? I could change my mind later and not do it. Or something could come along and prevent me from doing it. Like maybe I'm going up the stairs and I slip and fall and break my leg. Well, I'm not going to the lecture then, I'm going to the hospital. But the fact that I decided it, that's still there, isn't it? So sometimes the decision and the action are the same thing. Somebody's pushing you and you you react and you pop them in the nose, right? Hopefully this doesn't happen to you very often, right? But these things do happen. That's a case of somebody deciding and acting at the same time. But a lot of our decisions we make, and then the action will happen or not later on. And we do hold people responsible for that. If you choose the right thing, but you're not able to bring it off, we still give you the credit for it quite often, don't we? If you choose the wrong thing, and it doesn't come off successfully, like here'd be an example. Let's say all of you have good friends, right, of one form or another. Let's say you have some good friends of the same sex as you. This is assuming that sort of a heterosexual paradigm, right? But I'm not going to go into every single possible contingency just to make it work for every sexual orientation. So we'll just stick with, men, women. Let's say men have male best friends who then might steal their girlfriend, or women have women best friends who might steal their boyfriend. If your best friend actually has the intention and makes the decision, let's say they write it down in their diary or something, I'm going to steal your boyfriend or girlfriend. Let's say it doesn't work. Let's say your boyfriend or girlfriend has got good character and says, I'm not going to allow this sort of thing to happen. But you find out about it later on. You're going to hold that person responsible, aren't you? You're not going to say, well, it didn't work, so no harm, no foul. Are you? I hope not. That would be very forgiving, but maybe a little imprudent. So, yeah, decisions. Anything else you can think of? Good, there's, what else can you think of that we do hold people responsible for? Yeah. Oh, you didn't have your hand up. What else did you guys write down? Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes like your children.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's why parents will often get quite uptight, right? Quit misbehaving. You're embarrassing me in public. I remember my mom saying stuff like that. Yeah, if somebody's a bad kid, quite often we'll say, yeah, look at that person's awful parenting skills. There's actually, I used to show this in one of my classes, there's actually a condom ad that shows this kid, and he's in a grocery store, and he is just throwing a tantrum. You don't know it's a condom ad until the very end of the thing. You just see this kid going nuts, and everybody around them, and this dad, his eyes just sort of rolling, everybody around just kind of expressing disdain for this awful dad who can't control his kid. Then in the Zazu condoms, that's the message of that. But it could just be, hey, that guy's a jerk. That's why his kid's a jerk. Or, it could go the other way. Why do your parents want you to excel and succeed? They may, and I hope that all of you actually do have parents that want it for your own sake because they love you and care about you. But, there are some parents who want their kids to succeed. Why? Yeah.
It makes them look good?
It makes them look good. It reflects on them as parents. And the only reason why we would think that is because we think that parents actually do have some influence on their children. If children and parents totally random, unconnected, it doesn't make any sense to hold parents responsible, does it? We even do this legally. I mean, if you're a kid and you get in enough trouble, In the right cities or states, your parents might have to, pay restitution, or even do some usually limited time because of the things that you do. Depends on the place where you are, though. Sometimes they'll just make you a ward of the court instead. What don't we hold people responsible for? I used the example of addiction, so let's leave that one out. What else don't we hold people responsible for when it comes to their actions? When do we tend to excuse people?
I don't know how to say this like in just a word, but maybe like for example when like the economy of a country is not going like in a good direction, then like we tend to like say that the president or whoever's in charge is the guilty person, but not the society, something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, when we shift the blame for things to other people, then we don't hold people responsible. We do this, yeah, you're right, sometimes with people who are in charge, none of the people below them did anything wrong or had any role, it was just this person's fault. We do it the other way too. When excusing people, we'll say, well, the criminal really didn't, have any choice. It's society's fault. It offered him all these wonderful things that he could get his hands on if he stole, killed, whatever, and it didn't give him any opportunities. So we do stuff like that. Anything else you can think of? Yeah.
When an accident occurs?
Oh yeah, when an accident occurs, sometimes we do hold people responsible.
Like if something like malfunctions in your car and you hit somebody else's car.
Yeah, okay, that's a good example. Your brakes go out. You rear end somebody. They probably still will.
Like technically it's their fault, I guess, but they'll probably be excused like the moral aspect of it because they couldn't have helped.
Yeah. Sometimes we do hold people responsible, when we talk about manslaughter, right? I'm juggling axes and I shouldn't be doing that in the nursery. And the axe falls and hits the kid and, I probably should not have been doing it there. But I didn't mean for it to happen. And notice, even when we hold people responsible and we do manslaughter charges, that's less than a murder charge, isn't it? I actually talked in another class today about a guy who I knew when I was teaching in prison, who I really sympathized with. He was in prison because he had killed another man. And he got murder 1 because he hunted the guy down and killed him. And we give murder 1 to people who premeditate the murder. Now, why did he do it? Well, the other man had raped and killed his wife. And this guy was 20 years old. And this is back in the 80s. He could not count, in all likelihood, on the justice system actually catching and punishing the man who raped and killed his wife. So he took the law into his own hands and went and killed the other guy. I can sympathize with him. It's, that's the sort of case where we might actually say, like Aristotle would talk about, maybe this guy was actually less responsible. Maybe he was being impelled by anger, but the prosecutor didn't see it that way. The prosecutor said, well, you went and you actually tracked the guy down, so murder 1. That was holding him completely responsible, right? Are there cases where we don't hold somebody responsible besides just accidents? Yeah.
Like if they're, say like a mental sort of thing.
Yeah.
If you go to court and like someone's found like not mentally competent to stand trial, then they don't have to face the consequences.
You're right, there are those cases. Sometimes it's a special sub-case called by reason of insanity. Somebody who's not in their right mind when they did the action. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, isn't there? Aristotle wants to figure out, okay, when should we actually say that somebody's responsible and when shouldn't we? Let's think about this now. What do we do when we hold people responsible for actions? These are the sort of indices that tell us there's responsibility at work. So what do we do when people are bad and we hold them responsible?
Punish them.
Yeah, that's one key thing. Punishment. Could be corporal punishment. You know, when you're a kid and you're misbehaving in public and your parent comes up behind you and gives you a pop in the back of the head, they're not just, you know, doing that for fun, I hope. Some do, but hopefully not that many. They're actually telling you, they're sending you a message. You should not behave like this in public, or maybe not at all, right? It could be all sorts of other kinds of punishments. Some parents, you know, it's all timeouts. Sometimes that seems a little ineffective, but, you know, different styles, I guess. What are other ways we punish people? We put them in prison. We take away time from them. We fine them money, right? You have to pay this amount of money. Speeding tickets, right? How many of you have had speeding tickets before? Oh, only one of you? Wow. These are very law-abiding. Two of you? What happens? You know, I mean, you know, you get caught. They give you a citation. They say you have to show up in court or just pay this right now, or you know, pay it in the mail. And they're punishing you. They're saying you were bad. Well, what else do we do? Is that all we do? Punish people?
Rehabilitate, like if they have issues.
Let's call that
made them do
teaching. Sometimes we actually try to teach people that we think
They
are
don't know right from wrong. for the
exactly.
most part.
Yeah, very, very good. I wasn't thinking of that, but that fits in very well. Let's think about celebrities that we think are doing the wrong thing. Can we actually punish them?
Don't give them attention.
Well, they don't care if one individual person gives them attention, but that could work for other people, right? The practice of shunning in Amish and Mennonite communities is actually a form of punishment. It's a way to try to enforce social conformity. What else do we do, though? Who's a celebrity that you think generally does the wrong thing? Anybody?
Lindsay Lohan.
Okay, yeah. Is she like shaped up at all recently?
Yeah.
She has?
I don't know.
I don't know either, because I haven't, you
I
know,
do know.
I haven't heard any news about her for a while, so I'm assuming she hasn't gotten in any trouble for a
Yeah,
while.
I don't think so.
She did get in a lot of trouble before, right? Now, when she was, let's say we're just talking about her when she was getting in trouble. How do people behave? Who didn't see Lindsay Lohan, who couldn't actually punish her or influence her, what did they still do? They say bad things about her, right? Look at that, you know, they pick whatever name you want. So we blame or criticize people who we think are doing the wrong thing. Realistically speaking, can any of you likely influence whoever happens to be president at the time? I mean, it could, you know, there could be like a movie kind of thing where, you know, your letter happens to reach their desk at just the right time, and it made it through all the, you know, tens of thousands of letters that came that day, and it flutters there, and they open it up, and, you know, the president reads it and says, oh my goodness, I'm you know, struck to the heart by Ms. Engel's, you know, criticism of me for this policy. That doesn't usually happen, though, does it? What do? We do still criticize people. We say, that person's doing the wrong thing. Or, what do we do if somebody's doing the right thing? We reward them, you're right. And rewards probably come in just as many varieties as punishments do, right? We give them money, we give them social standing, sometimes we reward them by not punishing them, you know, not requiring them to do something. We give them nice things, gift baskets, you know, trophies, things along those lines. What else? What would be the opposite of blaming or criticizing? Let's say you like the president and what he or she is doing at the time. You what?
Praise them.
Praise, exactly. And I suppose teaching, you wouldn't teach them to quit doing what they're doing, you'd maybe teach them to do it even better. I have to think more about that one. That's one I haven't had proposed to me before as an idea in this. So these are the ways that we tell that we actually hold people responsible. It was the same way in Aristotle's day. It's the same way in every society at every time. There are some actions that are praised and some actions that are blamed. There are some rewards given out, there are some punishments given out. Now, if a person doesn't actually have any control, rewarding them or punishing them is kind of a silly thing to do, isn't it? It still happens. But if somebody committed a crime and there was no possibility for them to not commit that crime, maybe they shouldn't be punished. If somebody did something good, but they didn't mean to do anything, they didn't mean to do the good thing, maybe we shouldn't reward them. You know? If they couldn't help from doing that. So when should we hold people responsible? What should we actually hold them responsible for? So now I'm going to give you Aristotle's answer. And we'll look at this in a little depth. Aristotle talks about the voluntary and the involuntary. And there we go. Voluntary and involuntary. Let's use that as an example, sneezing. Right? Great example. Happens all the time. It's going to happen more and more, now that the weather's turning. Is sneezing a voluntary or involuntary action? Involuntary. I hope nobody thinks it's a voluntary action. I mean, it could, in a certain sense, be a voluntary action. There's a thing that you can actually take to make yourself sneeze. A type of tobacco, it's called snuff. Not the snuff that you put in your mouth, but little finely powdered tobacco. It was really big back in the 17th and 18th and 19th century. And coal miners still use it because they sneeze to try to get all the coal dust out of their lungs. And when I was over in Germany as a soldier, it was really popular, and you could get it in apricot or peppermint and all these different scents. The act of sneezing itself, though, is involuntary. If something is irritating your sinuses and it reaches a certain level, you will sneeze. Just like, your breathing is not actually voluntary for the most part. You're not even conscious of it. And if you try to, hold your breath, remember when, maybe some of you when you were kids, you threatened to hold your breath forever. Why didn't it work? Sooner or later, your body wants some air and it makes you breathe. Those are some examples of what Aristotle might call compulsion. In this case, it's not an external force, right? It's an internal force. It's in you, but there's something in you that's making that happen. Your emotions, to a certain extent, are involuntary. If I call you all sorts of bad names, how do you feel? Just out of the blue. Not like you hit my car and damaged it. How do you feel if somebody just calls you a whole bunch of bad names? Happy?
No.
Oh, I love this. Give me some more. How do you feel? Anger, yeah. That's one set of responses. And why do you feel angry? Because you feel that the person is doing the wrong thing to you. You might have other responses. You might feel, if you're not glad, sad, glad, mad, you might be
Upset.
Yeah, upset. Sad. Right? People feel down. Are you responsible for that feeling? Do you have a choice in it? Aristotle actually calls those passions, meaning things that happen to one, things that are done to one. You have some control over it. I mean, how long you stay mad, how you will let the sadness affect you, you have control over that aspect. But the sheer getting mad, for the most part, you don't have control over that. Aristotle says that things that the agent, the person who's doing it, where the agent is the origin or the cause of the action, that's when things are voluntary. I decide to walk across the room. I am causing myself to walk across the room, right? Now, if you had a gun and you were doing something like in the Westerns and you were, shooting at my feet and saying, "Dance, Dr. Sadler, dance," right? Then that would be compulsion. I'm jumping to avoid the bullets. In one respect, it is still voluntary because I do have the choice. I could just sit there and let the bullets hit my feet, but I'd much rather not do that. I'd much rather dance around and make you happy, which is why you be doing it in the first place. Than get shot. But that's much more involuntary than voluntary. If I grab Aristotle uses this as an example, if I grab one of your hands and I smack another person with it, you didn't actually smack the other person. I smacked the other person and I used you as an instrument for it. Or let's say I was really big and strong and I picked you up and I'm swinging you around like the wrestlers do and I smacked somebody else with you. Again, you would not be responsible for that. That would not be your choice. As a matter of fact, you'd probably be screaming and trying to get away while I was doing it, right? So if compulsion can be something that makes it involuntary, can you think of anything else that would make it involuntary? What else does Aristotle say? What are some other things that interfere with the agent being in charge of what they're doing? You remember from the text? Yeah.
Ignorance?
Ignorance, very good. Now, Aristotle talks about a number of things that you could be ignorant of. I'm going to sort of read this to you. He says, where is that? Perhaps it's well to determine the nature and number of the things we can be ignorant of. A man may be ignorant of who he is. That's pretty rare. What he's doing, that's much more common. What or whom he's acting on. Sometimes also what, i.e. what instrument he's doing it with. And to what end, and how he's doing it. And he says nobody could be ignorant of all of these unless they're totally crazy, so we're not going to worry about totally nuts people. But most of these, not so much not knowing who you are. I mean, you'd have to be kind of crazy not to know who you are as well, right? But the rest of these, you could be ignorant of particular things in that situation. So let's look at what you're doing. He talks about the example of telling a secret. Do you always know that you're telling a secret, that you're divulging information that's supposed to be kept from other people when you do it? You might think you're just communicating something that everybody knows. People don't tell me secrets, usually, by the way, because I'm prone to this sort of thing. I'm pretty straightforward. So, if you have any deep secrets, don't confide them in me. If you don't want other people to know about them. He's talking about some guys in his time. There was this thing called the Mysteries. It was a particular religion. And Aeschylus, a playwright, he thought everybody knew about it because I guess when he went to the Mysteries, everybody he knew was there. And so he divulged some of the secret rituals, bless you, in his plays. And then people got angry at him and they said, "What the hell are you doing? You're giving away our secrets." And he said, "Well, I didn't think I was doing that. I thought I was just writing a play." Can you think of other examples where somebody thinks they're doing one thing, but they actually do another? You ever hurt somebody on accident? No? None of you have ever hurt somebody? Physically, psychologically? Playing sports, maybe? It's easy to hurt people playing sports. Well, some certain sports. Golf it's a bit harder than, say, football, isn't it? I broke a kid's leg in soccer. The that's not what I meant to do. Actually, we both meant to do the same thing, which was to get to that ball before the other guy did. And we both wound up at the same time, and we saw the other guy coming, so we laid into it as hard as we could, and we both kicked it at exactly the same moment. And I ended up like flipping over, and I heard his leg crack. Now, did I go out on the soccer field saying, I want to break that guy's leg? That's what I'm aiming at. Did I even do that in the moment? What was I trying to do?
Use the ball.
Yeah, we have a different description for the action. I was trying to kick the ball. I didn't realize that that was going to be the effect of it. Right? Neither did he. I mean, it could have gone the other way. I could have broken my leg instead. I don't know why his broken, mine didn't. Probably a matter of physics. Anything else like that that you can think of? Where you're intending one thing, but you end up doing another? Well, let's look at some of the other possibilities then. What or whom you're acting on? Sometimes we're ignorant of this. Driving it actually provides you some good examples of this. Why did you hit the other car? Well, you didn't know that it was icy. You didn't know that you were driving a car on an icy road. You thought that you were driving it on a road that was clean. Right? That could be a perfect example of that. The instrument that you're doing something with. He uses the example of sparring, fighting with weapons that are actually supposed to be blunt. Back in the old days, they didn't, have like PVC, practice swords to hit each other with. They actually used real swords, but they would blunt them, or they'd make them out of wood. And you might actually think that, you're going to poke somebody with a thing that's going to hurt them, but not hurt them like kill them. Just, hurt them a bit. And turns out that somebody left the blunt tip off the sword. And do it, and the sword goes through them, and you say, oh, this didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to do. I was ignorant of one of the particulars of the situation. Could we think about anything like that in terms of other things? The means that you were using. Let's say that you don't realize that you're... well, here's a good example. A lot of our apple juice apparently comes from concentrate, and a lot of it is now coming from China. And Chinese products are not actually the most safe. I think you all know this, right? Lots of stuff winds up in them that probably shouldn't be in them. And there's not a lot of checking of this sort of thing. So all of you, let's assume that you're parents, right? Somewhere down the line, I think most of you are going to be parents. You're going to have kids. Or you're going to watch somebody else's kids. And one of the things that you ought to do is make the kid a good breakfast. At least until they get old enough to make it themselves. Then maybe they can start making you breakfast. And what do you know a good breakfast includes every day? Is it just cereal? No. Maybe some juice. You get old enough, some coffee. In my family, we used to drink coffee really young. Stuff to be good for you. So you're buying this apple juice, and you're not realizing that it actually has some arsenic in it. And you're giving it to your kid day after day after day. You don't know that. It doesn't say arsenic on the label. You're doing your due diligence. You're using an object that you don't realize is damaged, that you don't realize is corrupted in some way. There's lots of possible cases of this. A lot of the things that we do with our computers, I suppose, since we don't actually know the way most of this stuff works, you didn't mean to eliminate somebody else's paper. You were just clicking on some buttons. Well, that to be a case of ignorance, right? You might not be responsible for what you're doing in that case. What else? He says, where is that? To what end? You have a different thing in mind. How you're doing it. He has the example, once again, of somebody who doesn't understand their own strength. they hit somebody else, they don't realize they're going to kill them. When do people end up in this sort of ignorance? Are there certain things that tend to make us lose sight of things? I mean, there are cases when we just don't know these sort of things, but are there characteristic conditions? All of you are too young, of course, to ever have been drunk, because you're all, 18, 19 or so like that, right? But let's just assume that any of you had ever drank immoderately. What happens to people when they get drunk? Yeah.
Well, you lose judgment.
Yeah, you lose judgment, which means you become ignorant of some of the facts of cases. And if you drink enough, you will become ignorant of pretty much everything except for your immediate surroundings. And sometimes even whether up is down, where you are. You could actually drink enough to become ignorant of who you are. That happens to people sometimes. Or you have to drink an awful lot, I think, for that sort of thing to happen. But there's a state of ignorance that comes from drinking. Or we could think about any other drug, right? Somebody takes a hallucinogenic, and now, I had a friend, for instance, who was a hippie, and what got her off of acid, which she took for quite a while, was that she had a bad hallucination where wolves were coming out of the walls to eat her, and it went on for hours. And that cured her. She never took acid again after that. Now, those wolves weren't real, right? Let's say one of those wolves was actually her friend, and she thought she was fighting a wolf when she hit her friend with the lamp, or the paperweight, or pick whatever, or the poker, she would be ignorant. What about when we get angry? Do we become ignorant of things when we get angry? Yeah, like the fact that we actually love the person that we're fighting with. We forget that, don't we? Pretty easily. So these can be things that bring about ignorance. What if you have a bad character? What if you're the kind of person that thinks that wrong things are actually the right thing to do, and you like doing them? Could that be ignorance? What do you think? Does that feel the same to you, though, as the sort of ignorance like, I just didn't realize that the stick was pointed when I poked that person with it? I was just screwing around and I accidentally ran them through. Does that seem to be the same kind of ignorance? I didn't realize that it's really wrong to kill people because I actually like doing that sort of thing, and I'm a cruel person. Does that seem similar to I accidentally poked him? Or does there seem to be a difference there for you? Aristotle says there's certain kinds of ignorance that we're actually responsible for. Think about it in terms of causes, right? You have an action, and the action can be done because of ignorance. But if you're responsible for the state of ignorance that you're in, you are acting in ignorance, but you're not acting just because of ignorance. So if you're drunk, who got you drunk? Most of the time. Yeah, yourself. I mean, you actually raised the beer, the liquor, the wine. It'd be different, I suppose, if somebody else, got you drunk in the middle of the night and you didn't realize it, and they poured the liquor down your throat, or they injected you with heroin, or they slipped a hallucinogenic into your soda or something like that. Then it would be somebody else who's responsible, right? You're not accountable for that sort of ignorance. Or let's say something goes wrong in your brain. There are cases where people have a stroke or an aneurysm, or they get hit in the head hard, and then things go wrong inside their brain in a variety of different ways. And it's not always things like losing hearing or losing color vision. Sometimes it's things like not being able to recognize your family as family, which would make it very hard to be a mother or a father. Would you be responsible for that state of ignorance? No, it would be something else that's causing it. If you have a bad character, so bad that you actually think wrong is right, you are ignorant, but how did you get that way? By doing bad things over and over and over again, making the wrong decisions. So Aristotle would say, in a case like that, if your vice is the reason why you're ignorant, then you would actually be responsible for that, and that wouldn't get you off the hook. So now notice, ignorance is sometimes a reason why we're not responsible for our actions, but sometimes it isn't. Same thing with compulsion. You know, there could be some sort of, there are some things that can compel us. Like, you know, realistically, if I hold a gun to any of your heads, I'm guessing none of you are like ex-military, ex-police, or anything like that, right? Because you're all, again, college freshmen. So when would you have ever done that sort of thing? None of you have had like military training or something equivalent to that that would prepare you for the danger of somebody holding a gun to your head? Right? Yes, no? Okay, so then I hold a gun to your head and I tell you to go to the ATM and take out all your money. Are you responsible for that money being gone when your say your spouse, your boyfriend or girlfriend says, yeah, I was looking at the account and there's nothing in it? You say, well, somebody had a gun to my head. You would be doing the action, right? And in a certain sense, you would be responsible because you could have done otherwise. You could have taken a bullet in your head. But who wants a bullet in their head? Other than, you know, suicides. That's a pretty strong means of compulsion. I could make it even worse. I take your family member and I say, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill them. Or torture them, or whatever. Aristotle would say that sort of compulsion can make an action involuntary. Now let's say it's something like, I steal chocolate bars because I really, really, really like the taste of chocolate. Not because I'm a kleptomaniac or, you know, have some sort of psychological disorder. And I recognize that it's wrong, but I just like the taste of chocolate so much. You know. And, you know, I could buy it, but, you know, who can buy enough chocolate? I have to spend my money on other things. But I really need that chocolate, because I need the good taste of it. And it seems like the more that I eat, the more chocolate I need. Am I responsible for that? Yeah. Because do most people have that sort of compulsion? All of you like chocolate, right? Anybody here who doesn't like chocolate? All of you really like chocolate, right? There's probably some tastes that you like better than chocolate, I'm willing to bet. Chocolate, if I gave you, what are your top 5 tastes, it would probably be in there, wouldn't it, for most of you? It is for me. Does that mean that we're justified in saying, because I have a desire for chocolate, I'm not responsible for my behavior? The way advertisements sometimes have people doing. What do you think? Does that seem reasonable to you? Aristotle doesn't think that it's reasonable either. He says, if someone were to say that pleasant and noble objects have a compelling power forcing us from without, and this is what people do say, right? I had to have that. I was under the spell of an attraction. I couldn't help myself. I couldn't control myself. Forcing us from without. It could be chocolate. It could be, you know, a beautiful person. It could be a great business opportunity. It could be the chance to go backstage with a band that you really like, even though that's probably not a good idea. This is sort of a digression. I actually had to, when I was not much older than you guys, I actually had to keep my sister from touring with a thrash metal band who liked the way that she looked and wanted to take her on their U.S. tour. on the bus. And I knew what that meant, so and I had a lot of kind of rough friends at the time, so we persuaded the band to send their offer, because that would have been a very bad idea for her to do. But it would have been something very attractive, right? Why would she have considered that? Well, that sounds like a really fun thing to do. There are certain things, pleasant and noble objects, that we feel almost have a compelling power. They draw us. It's really our desire, though. Our desire that's in us that's drawing us to the object. It's not that the object just by itself attracts us like a magnet. It's that there's something inside of us that we don't control, that we don't sometimes even have full consciousness of. And that is what is sort of attuned to that object. If we were going to say this, then all acts would be compulsory. Those who act under compulsion unwillingly act with pain, but those who do acts for their pleasantness do them for pleasure. So, like Aristotle says, it's absurd to make external circumstances responsible and not oneself as being easily caught by such attractions. So Aristotle's kind of a hardliner with this. He would say, if you are so susceptible to chocolate that you will do bad things in order to get chocolate, then you probably should stay away from chocolate. You should probably realize, what's going on. And you have a choice in that. If you realize, what are some other things that are more realistic? What are other things that people desire that get them in trouble? Crack it, yeah. I mean, if you get on crack, that's pretty much it. Let's take some stuff that's a little less extreme than crack cocaine.
Money.
Yeah, I mean, if you use heroin, heroin's even worse. Crackheads at least go out and try to, do things. Heroin, they just lay around. Money, yeah. People desire money. Will people do all sorts of bad things to get money? Will people make the wrong choices in order to get money? Is it that the money is just attracting them so much? It's on their side if they do that. This is what movies are about, What happens when the bag of money shows up on your doorstep? What are you going to do in order to keep it? In order to hold on to it? These are the sort of things that Aristotle is talking about. What else? Money is a good one. Drugs, different sorts. What else get people in trouble that they do have some control over? But they will often say, it's a compulsion, I can't help myself. And at some point it could turn into that, but it's not at the start. What about gambling? Gambling can make you need money too, right? Because you get into the hole. And I knew guys when I was working as a security guard who would get their checks, and in 2 days the whole check was blown because they'd go to the casino. Lucky they were living at home with their moms, because otherwise they'd be out on the street. What about sex? People ever get in trouble over sexual relations? And they say, I was so attracted. I couldn't help myself. I just had to do it. What sort of things result from that? Infidelities, right? I mean, if your partner is saying things like, when you're having conversations about who's responsible and who's not, and they're saying things like, I don't think that people are actually responsible for their own sexual behavior because we just have these compulsions and we have to follow them. You probably don't want to stay with that person, right? If you got your current partner because they cheated on somebody else to be with you, and they claimed that they had an irresistible attraction to you, watch out, because they probably will have an irresistible attraction to some other body as well, right? Food can be, a problem like this. There's lots of things that Aristotle talks about in other places that could turn out to be these sorts of problems, right? So now notice, we've laid out sort of a theory of responsibility of human behavior. We've gotten a little bit into the metaphysics of the human person. There are some things Aristotle thinks that you're not responsible for. when you sneeze. Of course, if you take snuff and then you sneeze, you are responsible for that, right? If you're coughing because you've got a sinus infection and it got into your lungs, you're not responsible for that. Of course, if you got a sinus infection and you didn't go to the doctor and it got really bad and then you got pneumonia from it, did you have any control over whether you go to the doctor in this society? Forget, third world societies. Yeah, you can go to the doctor. So, there are some things where compulsion could be caused by the things that we choose to do. Remember what Aristotle said about these causes, right? It's important to look at the chain of causality in this. So let me ask you, as we end this, and as you guys get ready to gear up for your midterms, we'll actually end a little bit early today. So after thinking about these things, how many of you can think of something that at the beginning of class you thought people were responsible for and now you're not sure? Or vice versa. Something that you thought people aren't responsible for and now you think maybe they are. Nobody had a change of thought on that sort of thing? That's unfortunate that I haven't done my job very well. Because one of the goals of this was to get you to think more deeply about this. And sometimes the ways of looking at these things that we come in with aren't actually the right ways. And part of the reason why we present you with all these philosophers and their theories is to try to get you to not necessarily adopt their view. You notice I didn't ask how many of you now are Aristotelians, you accept Aristotle's view. I just wanted you to actually sort of think, maybe it could be this way. Maybe I need to have some doubts about this. So that's where we'll leave off. I'll see all of you on Wednesday. I've got your exams ready for you. Probably won't take the whole class session.